tread on the wrong butterfly a few thousand years ago and the entirety of the world changes. And yet we are completely powerless. Nothing that we do will impact anything. And these two cannot both coexist. They're not. Either everything we do impacts the whole of the web, or we are little isolated separate things, which we are not.
Welcome to the Passing Through podcast, a show dedicated to exploring those spaces not just within, but also between and around us. The cracks in the walls, the moments between the moments. I speak with thinkers, authors, artists, teachers, and everyday humans who have touched the edge of the ordinary and found something to bring back. Have you ever just had a conversation with someone who you automatically vibed with? Like you've read many of the same books and you have similar enough views about the world and the current state of it that your time together just melts away. This chat with Manda Scott was one of those conversations for me. Manda is not only a best-selling author, podcaster, and teacher, she is a lovely and passionate human championing values like integrity, compassion, and generosity of spirit in a quest to envision the kinds of emergent futures we'd be proud to leave behind. In our talk, we explore the power of story, the myth of separability, and that weird paradox of powerlessness, and how we are all collectively impotent and unimportant, yet somehow, if I were to travel back in time and step on a butterfly or inadvertently kill my grandfather, the entire fabric of reality would be ruined. We talk about the importance of coming together and creating spaces where we can be vulnerable, and how this can help not only heal ourselves, but help us heal the more than human world as well. We talk about dreams and how to build better futures and a bunch of other things that I think you're going to enjoy. I absolutely loved this conversation, and I think you will too. You can find Manda on her own podcast, an incredible podcast called Accidental Gods, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find her on her website, mandascott.co.uk. You can read one of her many books or attend one of her shamanic courses or gatherings listed on dreamingawake.co.uk. All of the links that you'll need to find Manda will be in the show notes. As always, be good to one another, and let's dive in. Okay, Manda Scott, welcome to the Passing Through podcast.
Thank you. It's a delight and an honor to be here.
I am really excited to speak with you for so many reasons. There are so many topics that are dear to my heart that are also dear to yours, like myth and story and animism and art and creativity, grief, community, shamanic practice, imagination, dreams, ritual, all of that kind of stuff.
All the important things. Yay. Thank you.
So I hope to dig into many of those in our time together. But because there are so many topics, I figured maybe it would be better to begin with a brief quote that I found that spoke to me a bit, and maybe will lead us somewhere for a conversation together, if that's cool.
Go for it.
So the quote is, "It is easy to forget how mysterious and mighty stories are. They do their work in silence, invisibly. They work with all the internal materials of the mind and self. They become part of you while changing you. Beware the stories you read or tell. Subtly, at night, beneath the waters of consciousness, they are altering your world. And I wonder what that moves inside of you.
Oh gosh, so many things. So interesting. Yes, beneath the waters of consciousness at night, be aware, because we are storied. We are a storied species. Everything that we do arises because of the stories we tell ourselves and each other about ourselves and each other and our place in the world. And what frames those stories? I've really recently been talking to a lot of people about narrative. We just got a grant to change the hegemonic narrative on page, stage, and screen, which is a big ask. But what is narrative? What are the stories that make up the core foundational framing of things that people never question, that we need to question? What are the narratives of our trauma culture that tell us we're separate? And how can we, at scale and at speed, allow those to dissolve and allow new narratives to flow in? And exactly as that quote said, the stories that we imbibe and imbue with agency are the stories that shape everything. And our culture, one of the stories of our culture is that everything is logical and everything flows along the paths of physics. And they may do, but I think that's because the paths of physics are a lot more magical than we allow them to be. I read recently in Ralph de la Rosa's really beautiful IFS book, he was quoting a medic whose name I can't remember. I could go and look it up if we needed to, who had done the calculation that the chances of us being here, any one of us alive on the planet, any living thing alive on the planet, are 1 over 10 to the power 2,865,000, which is basically as close to zero as you can get. Just being alive is miraculous. And we take it for such granted. And then everything flows as if our world were this tiny, tiny little thing. I read somewhere recently by Occam Lafis, and we live in mystery and wonder and we exist in a pixel.
Mm.
And how do we expand that until we are integral nodes in the web of life? And flowing within that without our heads having to think that we need to predict everything. Huge question. So yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. Really good starting point.
Yeah, and what you said resonates with me as well, because I wanted to get into this stuff, into what stories are we telling ourselves? What are those dangerous myths that are more invisibilized, that help oil the wheels of this modern system that's kind of, in my opinion at least, poisoning the waters we all swim in? And I guess to maybe dig in there a little bit, do you have a sense of, if you had to choose the most pernicious myth that haunts modern culture, is there one that jumps out to you?
There's one I've been told jumps out, which is the one, Vanessa Andreotti, who wrote Hospicing Modernity. Her maternal grandfather, so she's part indigenous, part German, Brazilian, and her maternal grandfather, so the indigenous grandfather, said that the core wounding of our trauma culture was not the genocide of the people and the stealing of the land, that those were terrible and appalling and deeply traumatic, but they were epiphenomena of the core wounding, which is the belief in separability.
Yes.
And I think that it's that sense that we are separate, which is manifestly untrue. I mean, even within our own reductive mindset, you and I are breathing air that's been breathed out by trees, that we're breathing in dinosaurs, that we're breathing in the cosmos, that we're made out of stardust, whatever you want. We're not separate. We cannot be separate. And yet we tell ourselves this little citadel mind myth that no other sane culture embodies. So that, I think, the myth of separability of our minds and our hearts and our being from the web of life, which then leads us to think that we have to predict, that our brain, our head mind, has to work out what's going to happen in order to keep us safe, which is an impossibility and also is wholly unnecessary. I think that's the thing that really, again and again, when I listen to or read or engage with anything from indigenous cultures, Tyson Yunkaporta in his book Right Story, Wrong Story, which is beautiful, well worth reading. And he tells a story of the adults in the community, so these are the first peoples of Australia, are making a dugout canoe, which they are then going to sell to a museum as if it were an ancient artifact, which I think is really funny. However, the children are playing. They're jumping off a bend in the north bank of the river into the water and out again because there are no crocodiles. Today it is safe, and tomorrow it will not be. And he just leaves that one lying. And a little while later he comes back and says, we don't have the Paleolithic fight and flight response that you all talk about because we know where the predators are, always. And that really landed with me. We do not have the fight and flight response. And we just think that's innate. We think this is the way the world is, that everybody walks around in fear. All of our cognitive neuroscience, I'm doing a lot of neuroscience research at the moment because I'm going to talk to someone who's written a book on it. It's all predicated on the fact that fight and flight and all the rest of the sympathetic nervous system, the fawn and fiddle about and freeze and faint, are integral to who we are. And that our brains are pattern matching. There's a whole suite of cognitive neuroscience, very cutting edge thinking that says basically our brains are prediction machines. And I think our toxic trauma culture brains might be prediction machines, but I don't think that's what you'd find if you were to look at Tyson Yunkaporta's people or Vanessa's Indigenous ancestors and their people now. They're not prediction machines, they're engagement machines. They're not even machines, they're engagement with the flow of the web. We're here to engage, to ask, what do you want of me, and respond to that. And our head is there to go, oh, okay, you want me to be on this podcast. How can I do that with integrity and compassion and generosity of spirit and all the values that we want to underlie stuff? I don't have to predict what you're going to ask me. That has to be emergent. I just need to feel safe enough to let that happen. And I think the core wounding of our culture, that the separate belief in separability, leaves us feeling unsafe. And so we end up like little children trying to find safety in a world that we believe to be inherently unsafe. And the sooner we can wean ourselves off that, the better. And then we make it unsafe for other people. That's the thing. It's quite easy to look around at the world news and go, yeah, okay, it's unsafe. But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, there are so many arms that just came up off of what you were saying that I want to touch on. But the one that's loudest, the one that's grabbing me right now is this pervasive sense of loss by what you're saying right now. Because this sense of separability that you're describing, it severs us at the source. It is deeply traumatic and painful to have lost this animist connection with everything. To reference the quote that you just shared, that sense of, yeah, today it's safe, tomorrow it may not be, but we are tuned in, we are respecting the waters, we are aware of our surroundings. This sense of being able to read the night sky as easily as we could read the hands of a clock, and how we've lost this. Yeah. It's gone. To me, this is deeply, I don't even have a word for it. It's beyond words.
Yeah.
And it's something that's felt, right? It's a grief that's somatic, it's spiritual, it's in some other place. And I don't know if there is a space that's safe enough where I often hear people I don't often hear people speak about this stuff unless special effort is made to create a space where it's permissible, where it's okay to be broken, where it's okay to show your wounds. But in modern culture, we almost separate ourselves from that too. We separate ourselves from ourselves, from our own authenticity.
Yes. However, I think there's quite a big movement towards recovering that. I think it's essential that we do. We're up against biophysical limits now. We don't have time to piss around. And I think this is our birthright. And I think it is recoverable with amazing rapidity. I don't think we have to wait another 100 generations to get it back, given that, I think in the islands of Britain, the Romans brought the trauma culture. I question whether that's the case, but I think they certainly sealed the trauma culture. It may have been a bit there before, but We could go down that rabbit hole. Let's not. It's at worst, it's 10,000 years. The start of modern agriculture, which basically enslaves the web of life, is impossible if you know yourself to be an integral part of the web of life.
Yes.
We know that indigenous cultures manage the land. All of the continents were managed landscapes, but they were managed with the web of life, not in dominance over. So it's been a while in our culture. But essentially, if we do not turn it around in this generation, I don't think there'll be a next generation. So that's non-negotiable now. We have to do it. So then the only question is how. And I think exactly as you said, we have to first engage with all parts of ourselves so that we feel safe inside ourselves.
Yes.
And then feel safe in company with each other, which we know, you read Graeber and Wengrow, The Dawn of Everything.
Great book.
Was transformative for me in terms of understanding the social technologies that have existed and still exist in indigenous cultures around the world. We have the social technologies to engage. And then we also, I believe, my experience is, have the capacity to open our heart minds to the web of life and ask what do you want to be and respond in real time. So we can do all this. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a willingness to hurt and to stay with the difficult stuff when quite a lot of our training in our culture is to run away from that and lay blame somewhere else and cover up and protect all the wounded parts that are going, no, this has nothing to do with me. I don't want to be here. And that's, those parts exist. But we also have, I think, narratives. We're back to story at the cutting edge of where mysticism and cognitive neuroscience and spirituality and whatever you want to call the other aspects of connecting to the web of life all interface. We have the tools of individual, collective, and ancestral healing. We have the tools that say vulnerability is what allows you to feel safe. We have the beginnings of cultural tools that allow us to engage with each other and to create communities that work in the 21st century, because we have lost in our culture the capacity to feel safe. I don't think people have felt safe in Western culture for at least 1,000 years. If you couldn't speak up without risking being burned alive, that's not safe. And I was recently on a thread on Facebook about the annihilation of British culture by the Norman invasion and how genocidal that was and how crushing of culture. But even the culture then was what was left behind after the Romans annihilated the culture before it. So there's been waves of cultural annihilation on the islands of Britain. And then we managed to export waves of cultural annihilation around the world. So there's been a lot of trauma, but we have a lot of resource now to heal. And it is our job to do that, I think. Yeah, I just think that's non-negotiable now. If we care about the healing of the world, the healing of the human impact on the world, the healing of the human species such that we can exist in mutual flourishing with the web of life, then we have to do the work. It just is not an option not to.
Beautifully said. I really like all of that. And it stirred something in me, this phrase, these waves of annihilation and genocide. And we're seeing that right now in the world, namely what's happening in Gaza.
Obviously.
And this ties in for me into this topic that we're on of separability and this narrative. Because when I talk to certain friends of mine, even just yesterday, I was speaking to a friend about Gaza, and he was admitting, yeah, it's awful what's happening in Gaza. But what can I do about that? It's so far away from me. I have so many things that I'm dealing with in my everyday life. The genocide is kind of at the bottom of the list. And I was thinking, yeah, I understand that perspective. But if we were to really understand ourselves in the way that you're describing, where we are all connected, we realize that what's happening somewhere is also happening to us, that we are all in a pool. And if there's someone on the other end of the pool pissing and shitting in the pool, this affects everyone in the pool.
Yes. Good metaphor. Yes. Yes. But equally, if I can find balance and connectivity and find that heart open space within which I am resonant with the web of life, that too ripples outwards. Because this is no problem is solved from the mindset that created it.
Yes.
We exist in the death cult of predatory capitalism that tells us that separation, scarcity, and powerlessness are the way the world is. They tell us we are powerless, and they give us evidence that this is so. And yet, every breath we take has meaning and purpose if we allow it to. And we don't know what our actions are. I come up against frequently the paradox that as a writer, if I wanted to write a time slip novel, there's a kind of an accepted thing that if I were to take a character back 10,000 years, back to the time of the dinosaurs or something, they have to be really careful. They tread in the wrong butterfly. They might not even exist when they come back to the present. You know, you have no idea what you're doing, but you're going to have a huge impact, and it will ripple and ripple and ripple, and, you know, tread on the wrong butterfly a few thousand years ago, and the entirety of the world changes. And yet we are completely powerless. Nothing that we do will impact anything. And these two cannot both coexist. They're not. You know, either everything we do impacts the whole of the web, or we are little isolated separate things, which we are not. So then the question becomes, what is mine to do? And what can I do that will have the most impact? And I lean quite heavily into Donella Meadows' 12 levers of change. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Donella Meadows was an amazing systems thinker. She was one of the co-authors of the Limits to Growth paper, which various people have redone, and it was remarkably accurate in its thinking. But she was also, somebody said, so what are the levers of change? And she just basically wrote stuff out in the back of an envelope, but then she built it up. And right at the bottom is, she was looking more at governmental levels, but right at the bottom is tweaking tax policy, you know, basically keeping the system exactly the same, but doing minor changes. And it goes up and up and up and up. And the very second to top one is change the paradigm. And the top one is abandon all paradigms, which is, I think, what emergence is. It's, you know, the point of emergence from any complex system is that you cannot predict the new system from the old one. If you can predict it, it's not a new system. You just painted the wheels on the bus a different colour. The caterpillar cannot predict the butterfly. And yet, when the caterpillar dissolves into the imaginal soup and the chrysalis and the little cells begin to emerge, initially they are destroyed as being other by the immune system within the chrysalis, and eventually they become imaginal organs, and then they clump together, and you get the butterfly or the moth or whatever. So if each of us becomes an imaginal cell, we don't know what the butterfly is going to look like. And if we could predict it, it would not be a butterfly. I think that's really crucial. But what we can do is set the grounds for it to be a butterfly and not a giant vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity. We got one of them. We don't need another. And then we look at what are our values? What are our baseline asks? And so I've been working on this quite a lot. For me, values of integrity, compassion, generosity of spirit are the kind of threes are good that I've settled on. But if someone can find better ones, I'm open to that. And then we get the internal and the outer. We already talked about the internal. We need to do the work where we can create clean, clear, courageous, compassionate connections between all parts of ourselves. So we need to learn to trust ourselves inside, ourselves and each other. We need to create trusting, authentic communities where we can be vulnerable in our communities of place and of purpose and of passion. That's one of the values of the 21st century, is that we can connect across the planet. We don't only connect with the people we can walk to or write to, and then we connect to the web of life. However, I think in the outer world, at the same time, we can have really strong, non-negotiable baseline asks, which are clean water, clean air, clean soil. And if we asked for if that was exactly what everybody woke up wanting tomorrow morning, predatory capitalism would be over by tomorrow night, because not a thing of predatory capitalism is compatible with those. And therefore, the military-industrial complex would be over by tonight as well. So for me, it is unlikely that I could tell Netanyahu to stop what he's doing and he would listen to me. And I could take that as a lack of agency. Or I can hold conversations with everyone at a level that they understand, finding out what are their anxieties and their asks and their aims, and how much agency do they feel? And how could I help them perhaps have the motivation to think bigger, to think outside the box, to think into the world of connection and agency and sufficiency, and give them a sense of agency and direction and empowerment. And for every person that has that, so I created an acronym, which is Motivation, Agency, Direction, Empowerment, MADE. It helps me remember it. For everyone who has got that and is interested in creating narratives around it, then we spread that sense that this is possible. And it's that sense of possibility that uproots the old system and just dissolves it. Because if Netanyahu was on his own, he can't do what he's doing. Tipping points happen. And that's one of the features of systems. Linear thinking, complicated things are linear. Pull lever A, action B. Complex systems are non-linear and not predictable, and tipping points do happen. So, conversation with friend, tipping points happen. Where do you want to be on the tipping point? And if you want to be inertia in the old system, that's your choice. But it's not a given.
Yeah, there's a lot there in what you just said, but all of it is speaking directly to my heart. I try to do the things that you're describing. You know, my partner and I, earlier in the year, we founded an NGO. And our NGO is one of the ideas is to kind of reconnect all life, right? It uses IFS to think of us as a community of parts. So you're working on building that inner community. You're working on building the relational community to each other. And then you're thinking of expanding that out to the more than human world.
Brilliant.
And that growth is possible if you create the spaces where people can come together and be vulnerable. I've experienced it. I assume you have as well. So I know it's possible. I've felt it. And it's a thing that brings tears to my eyes when I feel it, because it's real and powerful and feels ancient. Because to go back to animism for a moment, for 300,000 years of the anatomically modern human, we were animists, except for the last 10,000 years. So like this is in our bones. This is literally in our blood. And if our bones and our blood are imbued and buzzing with this kind of energy and memory, we know that this is possible. And I think that's where a lot of my personal grief comes from, is that I know that it doesn't need to be this way.
Yeah.
And having these kind of conversations and talking to people like you who are like tuned into the same truth really is comforting and makes me feel this sense of empowerment that you're describing here. So yeah, thank you for saying all of that. It's really goosebumps.
Yeah, likewise. And I think that deep soul yearning that people have, it cannot be fulfilled, assuaged, whatever. There is no other way other than that sense of connection to community that is human and more than human.
Yes.
The dopamine hits don't do it. And our culture is just consumed with trying to fill a void that stuff will never fill. You know, the richest man on the planet is on ketamine twice a week for his depression. It should be that, there is no amount of stuff or rockets to Mars or anything, super yachts that is going to make you feel okay inside. There just isn't. It doesn't matter how many more billions of dollars you accumulate. It's not going to fill the void inside. So what happens if we just let go of that? And yes, we live in a capitalist world, and yes, destitution is not fun. But how fast, if we really tried, could we just change that? The billionaires of this world cease to be anything other than human beings the day we decide that dollars and pounds and euros are worth nothing, and we have a different means of exchanging value. It's not a complicated concept. We just need to make it happen. And they are desperately wounded human beings. And we can have compassion for that without necessarily giving them the tools to act out their screaming neon daddy issues. They need help and healing. They don't need another $1 billion.
Yes.
So what do we do to create the systems that create engagement and empowerment for everyone? Imagine if every human being on the planet was heart-led and knew what is ours to do. If I knew what's mine to do, you knew what yours to do. Every listener knew with that absolute inner knowing of this is what I am alive to do. And I am doing it to the best of my ability. Nobody else can do what is mine to do in the way that I can do it. I am unique and amazing and miraculous, and I am giving my all to this. And I am surrounded by people doing the same, whom I respect. And that reciprocal respect is one of the things that really begins to allow us to be vulnerable and allow us to feel connected. And it's respect not just from the humans in our world, but from all of the web of life. If I feel respected by the hill and the red kite and the sun and the oak tree and the wind, it makes a difference. And it doesn't have to be projected. There's a lot of head mind projection can happen in this world. And that's an artifact of our culture. But when it's real, it's real. And it feels different. And it only takes one instance of that for everything to shift. So I think creating the spaces where that one instance can happen is part of what our generation is here to do.
Yes. Yeah, strongly agree. I'm with you. And a thing that came to me that I hadn't thought of before as you were speaking was, yes, creating these spaces, if you build it, they will come. The sense that you create the thing and people will come, they will use the space, they will explore it, they will try to rediscover what has been lost. But I wonder if that's only some people. Is there a self-selecting process that certain people who have kind of heard the call come, and there's a big bulk of people who maybe need more of a more sophisticated invitation? Maybe there's something lacking from an imaginal capacity. Because I see this as connected to all of these crises, to the narrative crisis, to the cascade of crises that are just plaguing the planet right now. It seems like imagination is one of the core aspects of this, where some people can't imagine that, to go to a circle and be vulnerable with a group of strangers. This would be heresy almost, burn them at the stake.
And terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And you can't force someone into vulnerability. That's called torture, and it's not a good thing.
Yes.
Which is where we come back to the power of story and changing the cultural narrative to the point where engagement is possible and we want it. I think this is back to, I have a kind of metaphor where predatory capitalism is a disengagement and a disimagination machine. And what it has done, so my metaphor is we're all locked in probably individual concrete boxes, like a prison cell, chained to the floor, and the AI is painting pretty pictures on the walls. And for some of us, the pretty pictures on the walls feel like that's what we're here for, and we're happy to keep running on our hamster wheel. I don't think a single human being in the world thinks that they were born just to pay bills and die, but that's what the system gives us.
Yes.
And we kind of accept it because it looks like everybody else is accepting it. And we're in our concrete box, spinning our hamster wheel, paying our bills until we die. However, at the point when the stories clear away one whole wall, and there's bars there, but we can see the world outside, and that the world outside, there are people out there who are fulfilled and have that sense of being and belonging and mastery and engagement and full connection with the web of life, and they are soaring and singing and genuinely joyful. I think, just to take a small aside, we'll come back to the concrete box. One of the things that, again, Vanessa Andreotti's maternal indigenous side, she wanted to marry a man of Spanish origin, so a white person, trauma culture person. And they said, no, you can't do that. He'll get bitten by the snakes, so he won't know where the predators are always, and he won't know how to laugh. Because every time I talk to someone who's really been engaged with Indigenous cultures, they spend all their time engaged in social engagement, laughing with each other. However bad things are, they still laugh because they know themselves to be safely held. And actually what happened was, he turned out he was a lovely young man. They were able to teach him how to not get bitten by a snake, how to know where the predators were, and he did know how to laugh. And he was very strong and able to carry things back from the hunt, so it was good, and she married him and all was fine. But our culture has this scarcity, separation, powerlessness. We laugh at people. Laughing with people is a whole different thing, but we know when we do it, when we sing with people, listening to canned music in our heads keeps us isolated. Sharing in the making of music with people, singing back and forth, lets us engage, opens our hearts in a whole different way. I live in a world where there is no canned music because I think it's another addiction like tea and coffee and alcohol that just isolates us. But making music, that's amazing. And so suppose we're back in our metaphor, concrete box, someone's taken away, well, there's still bars, but they've shown us that there is a door and they've given us the keys, which is the stories that show us how we could reshape our world. We, again, live in a narrative where it's easier to imagine the total extinction of all complex life on Earth than it is to imagine an end to the death cult of predatory capitalism. That needs not to be the case. We need the stories that go, guys, it's easy. We have all the answers. That's partly what your podcast and mine are for. Hey guys, it's not complicated. We know the economic system that would completely change this. We know how to do regenerative agriculture, permaculture. We could feed the world tomorrow without industrial agriculture. We know how to shift the whole 6-continent just-in-time supply chain. We know all the stuff that needs to happen. We just need to get behind it. So those are the keys, the runes that will open the door. And so the motivation is, yes, I want to get out there. And the agency is, yes, I have the keys for the door. And the direction is, that door is there. Change the economic system, change the governance system to bring power to those with wisdom and wisdom to those with power. Change the way we elect people so that people feel heard. Gift trust to gain trust. The whole Audrey Tang concept of everything that she does in plurality to create a completely different governance system, which is engaged and engaging, and much more like the governance systems of Indigenous peoples. That's the direction. And the empowerment is, I can unchain myself from this floor and get out of here. And that's the harder bit, because we do all live it. We have to buy food, we have to find shelter, and we have to pay for it. And so I think a lot of the work for now is, how do we craft that transition? How do we make the stories that the other world is better? And how do we craft the transition to get there? And that's tricky, and I can see some ways through, and I can't see all of it yet. I did the Masters in Regenerative Economics at Schumacher nearly 10 years ago now. Scary time. And a lot of the time we had this metaphor, again, of the economy as this Boeing 747, flying at 30,000 feet. How do we get it to land without it killing a lot of people? And actually what we realize is we don't want to get it to land. You want to turn it into a helicopter mid-flight, and that's even harder. But it's not impossible. Nothing is impossible, particularly something like the current culture, which is the creation of 8 billion people, and not even all of them. If we all decided we wanted to do it differently tomorrow, we could do that. So deciding we want to do it differently is really key. And then doing whatever work each of us can do in our own communities of place and purpose and passion to go, hey guys, look, there's a better way than this. And we need the wide boundary thinking. I was at a meeting locally of a donut, as in donut economic, regenerative local town. How can we do this? And there were a lot of really lovely people, and a lot of them still had really narrow boundary thinking, which is, well, maybe we just need a lot more electric car points in the town. Okay, yes, maybe that's an idea. How about we step back a little bit, thought wider, and thought, what do we actually want this town to look like in 10 years? If we got everything right, maybe there would be no cars in the town at all. Maybe there'd be parking out there and bikes that you could hire and come in. And okay, so quite a lot of old people. So maybe there's also a fleet of electric taxis that take people where they need to go. And the AI is able to sort out who needs to go where and when, because public transport could be completely different. It doesn't have to be a bus that turns up, 3 in a row, 2 hours after you stood there waiting for it. How do we want people to be feeding themselves? How do we want people to be finding shelter? How do we want people to be building community? Maybe we worry about the placing of the electric vehicle charging points after we've had the really wide boundary thinking of how do we want our lives to be? What kind of future do we want to pass to the next generation? So wide boundary thinking, really important.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But even though it makes sense to me, I still, maybe like a lot of people, struggle to think of, okay, so it's up to us. We have the power. We can change the world. We can tell each other better stories. We can be midwives to that new world that's waiting to be born.
Yes.
And that's beautiful. And I believe that.
I can feel a butt coming.
Yeah. Yeah, because then if somebody comes to me and says, okay, so what's the first thing that we do? And I say, okay, we're going to focus on building your inner community. We're going to focus on building community with each other. Then someone invariably will say, how? How can we do that? And I could say, I have some tools. Do you want to try this? And we can try it. How can I rephrase this? I love emergence. Like there's a community building method that my partner and I are training in. It's an emergent process, and it's beautiful because you never know what's going to happen when you're in the circle of people. But sometimes it's a hard sell to explain it to people, or to be comfortable even with this unknown aspect. And I think maybe that's a big part of this for people, and maybe even myself included a little bit. There's this huge question mark on which is the right way. There's this sense of urgency of like, we need to get it right because time is running out. We're crossing planetary boundaries. The situation is dire, and there's this sense of chaos. But it feels simultaneously like appealing or surrendering to that chaos, or submitting to it, maybe that's the better word, feels somehow improper. I'm trying to find the right word. It feels like we want to welcome that chaos. We want to acknowledge it. We want to sit with it and accept it. And yeah, I feel like I get a little stuck at this point where I go, okay, I can sit that. I can do that. I could sit with the uncomfortable emotion. I can let the chaos in and feel the discomfort. And then how do we move forward from there? And from a practical perspective, because from a heart perspective, it feels like it can happen. It feels like, yeah, we just come together and we wait and we support one another and we channel those values that you're talking about: integrity, compassion, generosity of spirit. We sit with these things, and then good will follow. Like it will reveal itself. Kind of trust in the process. And maybe it's that simple. Maybe it is. You just get a bunch of people together. You try to cultivate these things, and change comes. But I have this nagging fear at the back of my head where it's like, what if that's not enough? Like I remember the youthful naivety of me when I was younger, thinking, oh, well, we love each other in this relationship. Surely that's enough to sustain us. And time after time, I found that, love actually isn't enough on its own. There needs to be other things too. And I'm rambling a little bit here. So thank you for entertaining me. I hope it's still making sense.
Yeah, it's totally making sense. Yeah.
But I get to that point, like, there's this fear I haven't been able to let go of yet. That is, what if this isn't quite enough?
And maybe it isn't quite enough. I think we have to sit with that. So I have 3 levels of response to this. The first is, that feels to me a head mind fear. What happens when you go out and sit with a river and ask it, what do you need of me? Or a tree, or a rock, or a red kite, or whatever is around where you are. Because if one is connected, then my absolute bottom line is it's not my job to work that out. I cannot predict. One of my guys turned up early spring of this year, and I was having a body treatment. I was lying on kind of table having an Emmett treatment, and as if she were standing next to me speaking aloud. I don't often have complete auditory hallucinations. She said, "The world is not what you think it is." And I was obviously in the right open enough space to hear that. And that really landed and keeps the world is not what I think it is. And I know this at a head level, but that kind of landed at a marrow deep level. So it's not my job to work it out. It's my job to ask the web of life, what do you want me to do? And then to do it. And get out of my own way so that what the web says is what I hear and what I think it ought to be saying, or I'm afraid it's going to tell me to do that I don't really want to do, or all of the ego head mind stuff that comes up and gets in the way. That's point one. Not everybody can or wants to listen to the web of life, and that takes an enormous amount of trust. And I might be projecting the whole lot. Who knows? So it works for me at the moment, but who knows? That might be a projection. However, the next layer is still, I think we have to do the inner work. And I loved what you said, surely love will hold this relationship together. And the more I do the IFS work, the more I do the inner work, the more I realize that what I thought was love was a whole bunch of projections. And that's never going to keep us together. And so that metaphor writ large is I have to get to the point where I've done the work so those projections don't have to happen. I have thought out the frozen parts. Thomas Hubel says that trauma is a moment frozen in time, and I've done the work so that I am in flow. And flow is responsive rather than reactive. And then whatever the nature of the relationships around me, if I can be in flow, there is a much greater likelihood that the people around me can also be in flow. It's not guaranteed. If somebody walks up and they're completely projecting and lost and triggered, it's unlikely that I can kind of wrestle them to be in flow, but I don't have to meet their triggers with my triggers. And the more people who don't meet triggers with triggers, who stay in flow and are able to respond rather than react, that changes the nature of things. So I think the inner work is vital, and helping people with the tools to do that is absolutely crucial. But not everybody is ready to or wants to or can engage with that. And then I think there are levels of outer work. Knowing that the system is not broken, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to shovel power from the bottom to the top. And it doesn't have to be like that. So I think there's a lot of cognitive stuff we can do that goes, this is not the way the world needs to be. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Ursula Le Guin. Even if you can't do the inner stuff, you can do some of the outer stuff. I think there's a limit because no problem is solved in the mindset that created it, and the mindset is our inner work. I'm looking at the new Not Yet a Party that Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are setting up, and I think it's very exciting, but we have to co-create that from a different mindset. If it's created from the mindset of the old political system, it will reproduce the old political system, and the old political system is not fit for purpose if that purpose is the continuation of complex life on Earth, which is setting the bar pretty damn low. But we're missing it at the moment, exactly as you said. The only reason we haven't crossed the remaining two planetary boundaries is that they're ozone and aerosol particulates, which we managed on a global level to work on. We've crossed all the others. So we're not going to cross those because ozone is not a thing anymore. So we crossed everything, and we have to uncross them pretty fucking fast. So there are all the levels that we can work at. Joanna Macy, the late, great, and very wonderful Joanna Macy, had the 3 pillars of the Great Turning: holding actions, systems change, shifting consciousness. And holding actions are still valuable. If you can stop ICE arresting 5 people in your neighborhood, that's good. And for those 5 people, that's probably transformational. But at the same time, one can be creating the systems change within our neighborhood so that ICE doesn't even arrive. And the shifting consciousness so that we're asking of the web of life, what do you want to be? And I think getting to the point where we understand that we cannot predict emergence into the next system. It's not a predictable thing. Our heads are not designed for that level of prediction. But our heart minds connected to the web of life completely are. And then our dream time and our capacity to engage at a totally different level than the cognitive is what makes us self-conscious nodes in the web of life. I don't think we're the only ones. I'm sure dolphins and whales and a whole bunch of other things are self-conscious nodes in the web of life too, but we're the ones breaking the planet. So we have to fix ourselves.
It's funny that you mentioned dolphins and whales just now, because while you were speaking, there was an image circling in my head. So I find this as interesting synchronicity.
Yay.
When we're talking about emergence and change and how things can seemingly be impossible or improbable, if we look to marine mammals as a symbol, this is very fascinating, because these are things that came out of the water, looked around, and said, you know what?
Water's better.
Fuck this. Let's go back to the water.
Yes, Douglas Adams, long time ago, the difference between humans and dolphins. Yes. Yeah.
So you go back into the water with lungs, lactating, and you're this interesting creature that serves as a symbol to say, like, it's never too late to change something, really. Like, you can achieve crazy things. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was a relevant point for what we're discussing at the moment.
And isn't it interesting that even in the energy over effectively whatever distance we're at, we are sharing an energetic space such that that energetic metaphor arose for both of us.
And, I think this dovetails into dreams, because you also just mentioned dreams and this kind of thing, this ethereal, liminal, strange thing that we call dreaming, whether that's when we're unconscious dreaming or that's when we are dreaming awake. Indeed. Which is a phrase that you will know very well. So I was wondering if you'd like to speak a bit about that, about what that means and how we can cultivate these kind of dreams together.
Whoa. That's a 10-year course. Literally. I mean, nobody's done it in less than 14 years, and that was with acceleration. So I use the word dreaming in its widest possible sense. So the dreams of the nights, the dreams of the days, and the dreams of who we might become. And anything that kicks us out of linear head-mind thinking allows us into the expansive heart-mind space of dreaming and allows our awareness to be much less constrained. I don't use plant medicines, and I have real not constraints, but I'm worried about the extent to which entheogens are being used in the West as a fast track to something, and they're not a fast track to anything.
Yes.
And honouring the plants means that they're definitely not a fast track to anything. And we see a lot of quite broken people coming into our Dreaming Awake course on the back of it. But for some people, clearly, it's a way through. But we don't need that. I think the thing that really I find is that if you put the work in, you can do anything that you can do with plants without plants. Mm-hmm. It just takes more work. And possibly then it allows a little bit more control is not the right word, but intentful connectivity. Because we don't want control, head-mind control. That's absolutely not where we're going. But we want, in the end, I do shamanic work, and a lot of modern contemporary shamanic work is working with the drum, and we want our journeys to be like our dreams, and our dreams to be like our journeys. Because the thing about doing 20 minutes, half an hour with a drum is you can hold intent for that long. I can set an intent for the journey, and I can hold it for half an hour. No problem. Holding a dream intent from when I go to sleep to when I wake up is harder. But it doesn't feel as egoically led as my journeys might. So we want, in the end, for those to flow together. And then in the end, we want to get to a point where dream space and life space are confluent, where the other realities are as accessible as this reality and as real. But I know where I am. One of my very early teachers said the difference between us and people who we would label as schizophrenic are that we choose where to go and we know when to get back. We know how to get back. And again, that's something that our culture has lost that was available, I am sure, through the entirety of human evolution. So I think that capacity to let go of the constraints of consensus reality, particularly given that consensus reality is a myth. It's a thing that we build out of the stories we tell ourselves.
Yes.
It is not and never has been the way the world is. But it becomes really solid. I haven't been to see them, but I've seen pictures of the caves up in Tibet where the masters have just put their hand in the wall and left an imprint. And all kinds of Eastern religions and spiritualities have got tales of people doing things that our physics-based reality says are impossible. And clearly they're not. So how can we allow ourselves to let go of the constraints while still being able to drive the car and not trying to walk through a wall or jump off a 30-story building and think we can fly? How can we function within a world that functions as it does and connect across space and through time in the way that dreaming in all of its senses allows us to do? Does that answer the question that you asked? I'm not sure it does.
I think it gives context for the next part of the question that arrived or emerged while you were speaking, which was, when we dream, are we accessing a field? Is it like the Jungian concept of psyche or something like this, an earth intelligence? Maybe it's even alive from an animist perspective. It is a organismic thing. And then when we are dreaming, it's kind of that thing moving through us, like the dream is a mycelial web that's just all around. And when we dream, we're kind of like a little mushroom fruit body that emerges, and
I love it.
We become the hyphae and all the little things in the mycelium that come up through it. Is there some sense of this, that there's a field that or an energy that we participate in, that dreaming itself maybe is alive?
It can be. It isn't always. I think is the thing. And I think it's very clear when those kinds of dreams have happened, and that they don't happen every night, even if what you do is with your world is practice dreaming for decades. There are some dreams. So we have broadly divided dreaming into 4 categories, and these are very broad, and there are multiple subcategories. I don't want people to get hung up on them, but there are predictive dreams, definitely. There are teaching dreams. There are, and the predictive dreams and the teaching dreams, I would say definitely the predictive dreams, and depending on the teacher, the teaching dreams are what you were exactly saying. They're the ways we connect to one way we connect to the web of life. There are what we would call therapeutic dreams. People in Jungian therapy have Jungian dreams. People in Adlerian therapy have Adlerian dreams. People in IFS therapy have IFS dreams. There's the ones that are broadly metaphorical. And I want to perhaps look at the parts of the dream as if they were parts of myself and kind of look at them in that way. And they're what one of my early teachers called pizza dreams. So just the events of the day scattered and just replaying themselves. And the dream that I had that night was of this great big giant pizza with the dough spread out and the tomato sauce all over it. And I was writing in very, very tiny writing with an icing bag and the cheese sauce on top of it. And so I woke up and went, even pizza dreams have a message? And he said, yes. And if you spend all day, every day trying to decipher the message of all your dreams every night, you will never do anything else. So I think some dreams definitely are connecting, and some waking dreams also. Waking dreams and sleeping dreams, we are connecting to the web of life. And sometimes we're just rehashing the events of yesterday and our fears. And I still have dreams where the phone has gone in the middle of the night to call me in to crack a chest. I used to be a veterinary anaesthetist, and I've missed it somehow, and something important has died. That was my trauma dream. Other people have exam dreams. That was my trauma dream, and they still happen. And I don't think that's connecting with the web of life at all. I think I'm just getting stressed about stuff. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. That's clarifying, and I like that. I was unaware that there is a way to divide, categorize, frame, and think of all these different types of dreaming, which everything you said makes perfect sense. And I had never thought about it in that way before. So yeah, thank you for that. That's something for me to chew on over the next days.
But be aware that it's very flexible and very broad categories and a lot of overlaps. And if you start picking it apart, it will fall apart. But broadly speaking, it's a useful starting point for beginning.
Okay. And I there's still so many things that I would like to talk about, and I know time is inching closer.
I'm okay. I don't have anything. I mean, I do in a bit, but not immediately. So yeah.
Okay. So with this concept of dreaming, it dovetails again into another thing, which is this concept of throughtopia, right? It's like dreaming another way of being. Is it correct to say that if we are dreaming well, whatever that means, if you are in service and in connection to the web of life through your dreams, that you are stepping towards a new future, a future that we would be proud to leave behind?
Absolutely behind. Well done. That's interesting. That depends on how I think by definition, if your dreaming is taking you forward to a future that actually is flourishing of humanity within a flourishing web of life, then would be my definition of throughtopia, then that was a connected dream. If it's something where we tell ourselves that that's what we're doing, it might not be. So I think it's back to, what does it feel like when I am fully heart connected? And it's one of those binary things. It's like being in love. Once you've been in love, you know that you have. And while you're still thinking, I'm not sure if I've been in love, then you haven't. And once you have, that's it. You know what it feels like. And it may still be a whole bunch of projections and lust mixed up together, but it's a definite feeling that you know what it feels like. So, and I think this is similar. Once you have felt what it feels like to be completely heart open and connected to the web of life, then you know that feeling. It doesn't mean you can grab for it. It doesn't mean you can necessarily replicate it in exactly the same way next time. I'm not trying to suggest that this is easy or predictable, or once you're in it, it's a continuous state. None of these is the case. It's a knife edge that we walk along for a little bit, we fall off, we walk along, we fall off. And the only thing that changes, I think, is that we notice when we've fallen off sooner and have slightly more facility to come back into balance. And I'm sure fully enlightened people, that's it, they're there. But I'm not pretending to be fully enlightened. And I don't think there are many people who do. And generally speaking, if someone tells you they're fully enlightened, they're definitely not. So, absent the fully enlightened people, we're doing our best to iterate towards the mean. And sometimes that mean is, or that end goal is something that we remember from the last time we were fully heart connected. So it's a messy process, I think. But yes, I mean, the point about throughtopias is we please don't need dystopias anymore, because where we put our energy is where we go. It's not hard to see how bad things could be. Utopias are lovely, but if you can't see how to get there now, I think they're interesting to have light at the end of the tunnel. But I want to see the entrance of the tunnel and know how to take those. I want the agency and the direction and the empowerment, as well as the motivation that gives us. And throughtopias, by definition, are the way through from here, where we are, towards that future where complex life on Earth continues to flourish and humanity is a part of it. And deciding that is a possibility. There's a lot of narratives that say that collapse is inevitable and extinction is pretty much an inevitable sequence. And, they're possible for sure. And I think the future that people, a number of animists even that I've spoken to recently, that think that most extinction, like 90% extinction of humanity is going to happen, and what we need to do is to be preparing for the 10% who survive. I genuinely don't see that. Because if we're at the point where collapse is going that fast, I think that kind of thinking, it arises from having watched too many survivalist dystopias. And everybody thinks they're going to be the plucky band of survivors. And if our planetary ecosystem is collapsing that far and that fast, There will be no plucky band of survivors. I don't care how many tins of beans you put in your bunker, it's not going to happen. So I think either we get most of us through, or probably complex life on Earth is going for another iteration around a sixth mass extinction and on to the seventh. But there have been 5 mass extinctions before. There is nothing to say that we are guaranteed to make it through. That's one of the reasons why it's 1 over 10 to the power 2,800,000 chances of our being here, because our ancestors survived through 5 previous mass extinctions. And the definition of a mass extinction, I think it's worth remembering, is 70% species loss over 2 million years. And we are doing it in 1 human lifetime, which is pretty fucking fast in geological scale. So there is no particular reason to say that an extinction is not going to happen. But I remember my guide saying the world is not what you think it is. And at a spiritual level, we are getting so much help. And perhaps this is wishful thinking, but I don't think we'd be given that help if it were inevitable that we go over the edge of the cliff. So I am assuming that agency that I can take might be useful, and I intend to take that agency until I no longer can.
Beautiful. And if collapse is on its way, if it is something that we cannot escape, wouldn't it still be nicer to be doing these things as the world collapses, loving one another, having integrity, being generous, being together with people in our grief and our honesty and our authenticity? I would rather be obliterated, in the loving arms of a community than fighting for scraps with Elon Musk and Bezos and everybody else. Yes. Being
kebabbed over piles of burning tires by our bigger and nastier neighbours. Yes, exactly that. I spoke to somebody recently who was 1 degree removed from Davos, so their friends had been at Davos, and I gather that Davos is now in the it's all going to shit, we may as well party to the end, which I could get quite triggered about that quite fast.
Me too.
Because you guys are quite high up the levers of power, and you could choose to do things differently. And the stories that you are telling yourselves are stopping you from doing that. And the meta story that says there's no point is allowing you to decide that all you need to do is buy a few more private yachts and a jet or two and some more champagne and everything. Oh, doesn't matter. Changing the meta narrative feels to me really quite important.
Yeah.
So that isn't, so they can see that there's agency they can take, and there might be a world they might like to leave to their great grandkids that might actually be worth having.
Yeah. Maybe my final question here would be, what are practical things people can do to move in this direction, to tell better stories? Because it's easy to say, let's tell each other better stories. I find myself saying it and then I go, is that helpful to anyone? Maybe it's helpful to raise it as a topic and put it in the collective consciousness. But
yes,
obviously things like meditation, talking about it, ritual, gratitude, integrity, doing these things, for sure.
Holding this podcast, spreading the ideas. These are useful things.
Yeah.
At the same time as advocating for clean air, clean water, clean soil. Again, if you spread the idea that those are human rights, and I don't know where exactly you are in the world at the moment, but I live in a place where the E. coli level is 320,000 times the safe one in the rivers because we privatised the water system. That needs to be undone. It's just, should be not negotiable. But I can also spread the story of the River Don project in Sheffield, where they're mapping the whole of the catchment area of the River Don across space and through time, gathering stories, gathering songs, gathering art that's been made on, around and about the river, and bringing in Audrey Tang's AI that will speak as the river, and allowing people to volunteer to be river stewards. So if the AI camera sees something that it thinks is, a pile of shit coming down, and it pings all the local river stewards, and you go, yes, that's me, I'm close, I'll cycle off and see, and go, yes, that is what you thought, or no, sorry, that's just a crisp packet, don't worry about it. And the river has the capacity to give me a river coin, which has no value at all. and is just a bit of bytes on a screen, unless the local cafe decides that it wants to make being a river steward a good thing, and you can come and have a free meal for a river coin, or somebody's got an old bike and they go, well, you can have my bike for a river coin. Then it has value, and then you begin to have a community of care for the river. And the river becomes an entity. And if some factory upstream opens its sluice gates and pushes poison out into a river that is measuring oxygen levels in real time, and the rainfall in the catchment area, and every other sensor they can have, it will scream. And people will know. And building that community around the river, and that software, when it's ready, that software will be available open source, and it doesn't have to be rivers. Any bioregion, any mountain, anything. The rivers happen to be a really good way of measuring a bioregion. Anything can use that AI, and that's going to be available soon. Spreading those stories, I think spreading stories that the current system is not fit for purpose, and a better system is there right under the surface. And what would it feel like? I was speaking last week to a group called Our House, who are going around the UK, holding people's assemblies and legislative theatre, and enabling people to feel what it feels like to be listened to have their opinions heard, to have people from diverse tribal groups across the community. Do you want regenerative agriculture? Do you think it's woke nonsense? But we all want clean soil. We all want food that's safe to eat. How can we find the uncommon ground that unites us? That's really important, doing that work. Even if you don't want to do the spiritual work, helping people find the uncommon ground that unites them, helping people have conversations, helping to change local democracy. Forest Row over in the east of England, they organised such that independents won 17 out of 19, I think, parish council seats, huge parish council. And they said, we're not here to make decisions. We're going to set up a citizens' assembly to decide what needs to happen, and we will be the ones to work out how to make it happen. And now the whole of that area knows what it feels like to begin to have a bit more of a distributed democracy. You could do that tomorrow. I think the stories that change is right there. We just need to make it happen, and it's happening all around the world. Everywhere there are activist groups doing this. We just need to join up the narratives so that becomes the dominant narrative. And we're doing that against a legacy media that is owned by the billionaires that doesn't want that narrative to rise up. In Britain, we're recording this on a Monday, and last Thursday evening, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana launched the beginning consultation for a new political party of the left. And within 48 hours, they had 500,000 members, which is more than any other political party in the UK, and it has not been reported in the mainstream media. If Reform had done that, the super hard right, that would be all over the news. It would be front page headline on every paper. So we're in a narrative imbalance. In gaming terms, we are playing at a much harder difficulty level than the people who are just flowing with the stream of the death cult. But there are more of us. Many, many, many more of us. And even within the legacy media, there are people who want it to be different. And the more we can create the stories that rise close enough to the surface, the more they can begin to bring them in. And I think that's really important, and I think it's really worthwhile.
Yes.
Does it land with you, though, or is there still a bit going, yes, but?
No, it lands with me. It's very nice to hear someone tell the stories, tell the good news, raise awareness about all the nice things that are happening. And that's what you're advocating for. And I think that's an essential part of what we have to do. Recently, I was speaking to a guy, he's a Polish shaman, and he went to the UN. He went before the UN to grant legal personhood to the Odra River.
Right.
And I played a small part in it with my partner, collecting signatures. And it went before the government, and now it is...
Right.
It's
brilliant.
I mean, they're just a far-right government just came into power in Poland, so that could change. But for all intents and purposes, it should gain legal personhood. So this future that you're describing of having this protected community of care, caring for the river and building community around that is inching closer to a reality every day in more places in the world. So it touches my heart what you're saying. it's happening, it's there, and if we talk about it, more people hear it and they go, oh wow, that's interesting.
Exactly.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I will always have, I'm afraid to say, I will always have that nagging fear in the back that, like, what if it, yeah. And that's just part of it.
But doing the work anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always an inner choice. Do I give in to the nagging fear and do the Davos thing and just sit back and have another cup of coffee and ignore it all? Or do I look at the nagging fear and go, yeah, well, you're allowed to be there. You're a part of me, that's your job. I don't have to let you run the bus.
Yes, exactly.
And I have a metaphor of a chariot, and I don't necessarily think I'm going to get all the horses hooked up to the chariot all in one go, but I could at least get them all in the same field. So, yeah, I don't think we can expect that not to be there. But educating ourselves, this is what your podcast is doing, is letting people know that other things exist. And then there are other podcasts. You and I do, I don't know how many you do, but I do one a week. You probably do the same. Mm-hmm. People can listen to a podcast a day if they really want to. That's lots of other podcasts to listen to. And there's a whole spectrum out there of people who are really working well and with great heart and good integrity towards total systemic change, which is what we need.
Yes, well said again. And speaking of other podcasts, I would like to give you the floor to talk about where people could find you, what you have going on.
You're kind.
And all of that stuff.
Okay, so Accidental Gods podcast, named because we did not expect to be the ones who were right on the cusp of species level extinction or species level emergence, but here we are. So we better step up. So Accidental Gods is wherever you get your podcasts, and we run a membership program which actually started before the podcast, which is my best endeavour to give anybody anywhere who can listen to English the tools to do the hard work to connect to the web of life. So, because I'm reasonably far along various neurodivergent spectrums, and I like things to be quite cleanly organised, the aim is you put your earphones on day one and you press day one and you listen and you progress through connection to the 4 elements and then setting intent and then letting go of beliefs. And then I introduced a 7th module, which is igniting the 3 pillars of the heart mind, which are gratitude, compassion, and joyful curiosity. And then we run gatherings, which are available to people who are not members, but members get them half price. So that's there, and that basically funds the podcast. So those two kind of exist together. The Dreaming Awake it's small group teaching, and mostly it's in person. During COVID lockdown, we started doing it online, and now we do online for other time zones because I do not want people to get on a plane to come and learn from me. I really don't. So my senior apprentice runs, I said it's a 10-year program, and actually nobody has done it, as I said, in less than 14 years. So Lou runs the foundation group that you have to do, and then the first of the cardinal points of that. And then there's a thing called the Throughtopia Masterclass, and Throughtopia is Thru-Topia. It was named by Rupert Reed. He's a professor at East Anglia a while ago. And that we ran that in 2022, I think. Can't remember now. A while ago. We're thinking of running it again, but we got a little bit hijacked by this grant. Not hijacked. We got a little bit diverted to a wonderful, amazing project that we're doing, which means I'm not going to put the time and effort into creating a second iteration of the masterclass. But for creatives, for anybody who's listening who makes videos or writes poems or songs or particularly writes fiction in any form, please stop writing business as usual. We need the Thru-topian things. And partly the reason we applied for the grant was that a friend of mine in film said, we could write you as many Thru-topian scripts as you want and they will not be commissioned. And therefore nobody will ever get to see them. So we're working on how can we shift the mindset of the real leverage point gatekeepers so that these will be commissioned and that publishers will publish Thru-topian books. Because you could write a crime novel that was Thru-topian if all of the characters who were busy figuring out what the crime was or perpetuating the crime, whatever, were considering that the existing system is not fit for purpose and what we need to be doing is creating a new system. That can be underlying. In the same way, I used to write lesbian crime novels, and there was the thing where you couldn't write a lesbian novel if it wasn't somebody coming out and having deep trauma. And I thought, no, fuck that. Sorry. That's not what it's about. This is a crime novel where some of the characters are not heterosexual. That's a different thing. So you can write a novel that is a thriller or a crime novel or a romance or whatever, and the concepts underlying it are not business as usual. We really need that now. So anyone who's listening who is creative, please work that one out. And my podcast, your podcast, loads of other podcasts. My podcast is there every week to talk to someone who is at the leading edge of the change that we need. Here is our little iteration of regenerative agriculture, regenerative economics. Or I was talking earlier today to someone who's amazingly doing regenerative education. How do you help kids to find that heart space where they know what they're here for from the age of 6? How do you do that? And the way you do it is help their parents know what they're here for. And expanding that out into the world is huge as well. There's so much stuff. We do have ideas of exactly how a new system could work. We just need to make them mainstream. Sorry, I keep talking for a long time, so I apologize.
No, I'm grateful that you just shared all of that. I think that it's such touching, important work, and I feel such gratitude for you that you exist, that you do these things, for your podcast, for everything you just shared, for your time with me today, for not just your voice, not just the content of what you say, but your actual voice, which I didn't share the whole time, but I find so calming and beautiful and amazing. So thank you for the actual quality of your voice and the things that come through it. So yeah, it's just been an honor to sit down with you, and this was amazing.
I feel really honored to have been given the opportunity to sit with you, and I hope we do it again sometime, because there's so much to explore in this. But in the meantime, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for passing through today. Yeah. You, dear listener, thank you for your support, for your attention, for spending some time with me and this episode's guest. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, rate it, like it, tell your friends about it, buy a billboard somewhere next to a highway promoting it. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but your support really does mean a lot to me. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next time.